She has extensive experience in the payer, provider, and digital health space. And she is a mom with experience with autism spectrum. We'll let her tell her story about that. She has a deep-rooted passion for democratizing access to high-quality care for families like hers. We love that. Prior to Spectrum AI, she was part of a rapidly accelerated revenue growth at 2 other digital health startups, most recently as the Chief Commercial Officer of 𝗟𝗓𝗓 Health, and previously as the SVP of Strategic Solutions of Amwell. This is where I start to just feel like a schlub because this is a mom who's getting a lot done. She also spent over a decade at United Health Group in various leadership roles, ranging from the national employer sales and account manager to clinical business development for the dual eligible Medicaid and Medicare population, the things she must know. She started her career as a senior consultant with Booz Allen Hamilton and a research nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Prior to finishing college, she served in the U.S. Army as a sergeant and a nurse. She holds, get ready for this, an MBA from Harvard University and a BS in nuclear engineering with a minor in biomedical engineering from MIT. She was awarded Glamour magazine's top 10 college women and spends most of her spare time teaching her sons how to play ice hockey. I mean, does it get better than that? Let's welcome Ling Shao, founder and CEO of Spectrum AI.
Hi, Shannon. It's an honor to be here, and it's sort of embarrassing to hear that long bio.
Well, it's intimidating to the rest of us. I'm like, I got to get a second job. This woman's moving and shaking. But it's lovely. You should revel in your accomplishments. It's wonderful.
I will tell you that none of those things were as hard or have been as hard as being a parent to kids on the spectrum, nor have they been as rewarding. So I love that you started off your segment, with a really powerful message about hope. And I would just say that, to all the parents out there, the rest of my resume might sound amazing, but they're doing probably the hardest thing that, that I've done in my career. So it's, just to help them understand what level they're functioning at. And then also, I loved your, packing your suitcase for, Journey of Hope, because there are just incredible moments that I think only we as parents to kids on the spectrum can savor, because we are so grateful for those, moments where most people take for granted. And that's kind of sad. They miss those moments to be grateful.
Absolutely, man. I love, I could just listen to you forever because you're so eloquent. So tell us a little bit about, we've heard a little bit about your story, but tell us what you choose to tell us about being a parent.
Sure. So I have 4 boys, multiple on the spectrum, and all over the place on the spectrum. So they had their own, each had their own journeys. All started off very, very severe. So several of my kids, I was told, would never talk. And, I think in kindness, the diagnosticians wanted to ensure that I had a reasonable expectation. And it turns out that I'm pretty stubborn. And so I chose not to believe them and really push my kids and myself and try to create the right environment for them. Really looked out there to find out who are the best providers and teachers and, anything that could be helpful for my kids in their development. And I'm really glad you started the segment with, collecting ABC data, because that's one of the things is the foundation really of ABA. And I started my journey for this startup because I realized that, collecting data, while it's the foundation and we need that data to be good detectives, it is something that's incredibly manual and difficult for providers to do, and it eats up a lot of their session time. And as an engineer and with all that, background in digital health, I'm aware of a lot of technology and solutions that can aid and assist them. So why would we not automate as much of that data collection and paperwork as we possibly can, so that therapists can really focus their energy on working with our kids and teaching them the much needed social communication skills so they can show us what, amazing individuals they are. And so that was really the genesis of our company. We essentially have an electronic medical record for the therapists, both the RBTs and the BCBAs, and frankly, anyone that works with our kids. And what it's tracking is the exactly what you're talking about in ABC data, which is what are the antecedents, what are the actual behaviors, what's their response to the consequences, because we're all trying to just figure out why, what precipitated the behaviors, and what can we do to motivate and help our kids communicate in the most appropriate and frankly effective way. So we use a lot of our tech is really around the automation of that data collection. So, it's reducing paperwork and administrative burden on the providers, which I'm sure is music to many of their ears. But it's also, how do we share that data with the payer? So that's the health insurance company, the employer, and even the parents, right? How can we as the consumer and the, and whoever is, paying the bills, receiving data that shows that there's actually good outcomes, because that's what's really going to rally the entire industry, all of the different players around outcomes, and not this, I think I would say what today is a very adversarial relationship between all the different parties, where there's a lot of mistrust. And what we really aim to do with our technology and the data sharing is, I'll keep harping on this, is two things. Is one is transparency, right? What's happening in the session? What progress is the child making? And, what are the protocols that are working or not working? And then accountability. So how can we help ensure that providers are really getting outcomes, that we're motivating them to get outcomes, and that we're giving them all the tools. And so, in a bit, we can talk about some of the insurance changes we're trying to push with this better transparency, so they are going to micromanage the sessions less, meaning not get involved as much in how many supervision hours you're getting this month versus next month, and how do I apply this very broad brush protocol to every child in every moment, which as parents we know our kids' behaviors go up and down. And so it's been really an incredible journey. We've gotten some amazing early provider partners and national health insurance carriers that have put their money where their mouth is and said, hey, we want to go down this journey with you and really focus on align everyone around outcomes, and not this kind of mountains of paperwork we have been doing for the last 10, 20 years. And then lastly, just also an incredible team that is so mission driven and passionate about our families and our kids, along with just investors that I never thought would really be so motivated and enthusiastic. So it's just been an incredible journey for me as both a mom and a founder to know that we are already making such huge progress and gaining awareness around how can we help all of the families that are impacted by this, and specifically all the children who really could be so much more, I think, than what people are expecting of them today. So again, just loved your message about hope in the beginning and really letting our kids shine, because there's so much there. And and by the way, my kids, who many of which I was told was nonverbal, my little guy, by the way, still is nonverbal, no receptive or expressive language, but we're hopeful because his older three brothers are now all chatterbugs. And sometimes my husband and I joke that we over-index and they're talking too much now. So, but I have a lot of hope, and I think it really is all about how can we improve the providers' lives and really get everybody aligned on quality and outcomes.
I have to tell you, so many times in my journey, you come up against things and you hear about things or something changes. And there were a lot of times that I would look at something and I would go, okay, that is not my path to fix that, but I'm going to hope and pray that there are brighter minds somewhere that are working on that. And I'm going to rely on that. And honestly, I met you and I was like, oh, you're one of those brighter minds that's working on that. And I'm very grateful, because I can't, when we shifted, because I'm that old and my child is that old, that there was no insurance funding when my son was being treated, and I was one of the people who was fighting and saying that needs to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen in my lifetime, and then it did, and then it brought new problems. And some problems that are just problems that need to be figured out, because ABA is a very data-driven science. It says we want to look at the data to figure out what we want to do next. And insurance is a very data-driven thing too, that says, hey, we want to see that what you're doing is what you said you were doing and that it's having an effect. But I see that the industry really has struggled for how to do that within this, how to make these two things work together. And as soon as I talked to you, I was like, oh, she's one of those brighter minds. She's figuring it out. And I feel like, so now you've created this company, and the company is Spectrum AI, but you have these two separate products. Talk to us about what these two products are and who are they for?
Sure. Well, I mean, the two products is really just exactly what you said, is a way to bring that data from the providers to the payers. And you mentioned, I'm glad you called out that when your son was first getting ABA, there was no insurance coverage, and that really tells you how young and in its infancy our industry really is. So most payers are just now getting their arms around. We started covering this benefit. In the beginning, it was a very manual process, and it still unfortunately is. And what they're missing is tools that can automate how they collect not just one data case by case, which they're doing today. So what they really need, and when you're starting to look at, when you're an insurance company, you need to look at the aggregate data across all of a provider's patients, so you can see, is this provider making more or less progress than the provider down the street or the provider in the next state. That's how they are able to measure, right, who is that top quartile or that bottom quartile providers, and who do they need to give more assistance or help with, or try to figure out what's preventing that provider from making the same progress as those around them. So the two pieces of the data that fit together is all of the data that's being collected in the electronic medical record, by the RBTs, by the BCBAs, those, with the consent of the provider, get fed to their in-network insurance companies. And it allows the insurance companies to do exactly what I just mentioned, which is to get the aggregate data to figure out, how do I compare provider to provider and figure out, for the really, really great providers, how do I give them, more incentive to keep doing the incredible job they're doing, and really, let go of the reins a little bit, so I'm not micromanaging them. And for the providers that are really struggling, whether it's because they're new or, because simply there's not enough of them in a specific region and they're just overworked, how can I help and encourage those providers to really step it up as well? So again, harping back to the transparency and accountability, the two sides just need to have more transparency with one another so they can hold each other accountable. And from the payer side, one of the reasons that you're probably hearing a lot of your providers complain about just how much paperwork and data, right, that they collect and then have to submit. It's simply because on the payer side right now, it's a very manual process. And so they're just trying to get through it as quickly as they can, but they're doing it case by case, and they don't have a very, I would say, aggregate way of seeing if one provider is truly better than another and who needs help. And so you're seeing a lot of, we call the payer side administrative denials, because someone just filled out a paperwork wrong, which I can tell you as a parent is unbelievably frustrating, but it's frustrating for the payer as well, because, it just means a lot of extra paperwork, and they're really trying to ensure, I know people don't give them any credit for this, but they're trying to ensure your safety and that your kids are getting, treatment from highly qualified providers. So it's kind of a blame game circle right now that doesn't frankly help anyone. And so what we're really excited about is we found incredible sponsors on the payer, provider, employer side. And many of them have been to conferences this year with us. And we're just excited to see how the field will improve as we start to lay the foundations of true collaboration.
Yeah, I think, there are probably two different types of parents that we have watching. Some that are already doing ABA and they understand the heartache and the headache that you're talking about because they've been through denials, they've been through reauthorizations, and they feel my child doesn't have therapy today because something isn't approved and I don't understand what happened and why can't reasonable, rational people sit and talk. Then there are other people that may be watching that haven't yet started ABA and this all just sounds rational to them. That like, why can't we have it be this way? It sort of is the utopia, and it's the thing that makes sense. That if what we're all about is making sure that the child is getting good quality ABA therapy that leads to good outcomes, then all of this would just make sense. And it feels like a necessary cog in the wheel that's going to make the whole machine work. But I'm just glad you showed up because you're making sense. And not everybody does in this field, Ling. We have to say that. Okay, so let's, Trayvon, I believe we have a video that we could play in the background without the sound as we're talking. Let's talk a little bit about what the experience, because the two products are called 𝗟𝗃 and Patterns, correct?
That's right. Yep.
And let's talk a little bit about what it's like for the BCBA and for that registered behavior technician who is, actually doing the therapy. What is the experience like for them and how is it helpful for them? And if we're able to run the video in the background, we will.
Okay, sure. So I'll assume for the parents who've never even seen what an ABA session is, we'll start at the beginning. So if you've ever seen an ABA session, or for those of you who have not, it really looks like the therapist is just playing with your child, and they're running a protocol. They're maybe like trying to get your child to match pictures, right? My 4-year-old, they were just trying to, he has no language, so they're trying to teach him how to point. And so what they were doing is trying to motivate him and get him excited about a certain toy or whatever it was he was interested in so he could point to the thing he wanted. And what they were counting was the number of times during, like a full day, right? So you're talking like 6-8 hours of, how many times, per hour or per whatever the time segment was that he would point independently. At the same time, they were also counting some of his more maladaptive behavior. So he would, bang his head on the ground or, have a tantrum because he was frustrated. He couldn't communicate and he wanted something, but he didn't know how to ask for it. Like he didn't know how to point. And so they're counting, how many times a day he would bang his head. And, this is pretty severe, to the point where like he has a little bone callus on his forehead because he hit himself so much. And so, both the, us, obviously me as a parent, but also the therapist, they're trying really, really hard to just find another more appropriate way he can communicate his frustration besides actually hurting himself. And so they're actually counting, how many times during the day and what the frequency is of him hitting his head or other aggressive behaviors, right? Where, he would scratch himself. And so he'd come home with like bruises and scratches. And sometimes he would even try to bite or scratch the therapist, right? So these are the kind of behaviors that we're all working towards reducing. And that's the data they're collecting. And then, Shannon, to your point, they're also trying to collect what were the antecedents, what happened before, right? These behaviors happened. What was the duration of the tantrum? How long did he try to bang his head? So that's all the data they're collecting. And today, everyone's gone to their primary care physician, right? So most electronic medical records look like what your PCP is using. So if you go into the room, they're like barely looking at you. They're typing away in the corner, looking somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that type of medical record is not appropriate for our field because, here you have a child that is aggressive, that, is harming themselves, that may be running out of the room. So the therapist can't like turn their back and, write down all this stuff. So what ends up happening in a lot of places is either they're not collecting enough data or all the data, or they're kind of like writing it down on a piece of scrap paper, or worse, they're trying to remember and try to recall after the end of the session what happened, right, and document all of that. And, I love that you started this segment with just, carrying around that piece of paper. And sadly, I've actually seen therapists do the exact same thing. And in this modern age, that is horrific for me as a parent to think how wasteful of an effort and how inefficient and inaccurate that is. And if the whole field is really based on collecting accurate data, and to your point, being this detective, then we have to arm the therapists, the RBTs, the BCBAs with as much technology as possible that helps them, right, remove all of the kind of cumbersome and just kind of wasted labor that they're putting into data collection. And then even on top of that, what we are working on in tools and building is leveraging AI to recognize these patterns. So you talked about how difficult it is, right, to see these patterns and just share the data. And the superpower of AI is pattern recognition, right? It's like some of the things even that I struggled with as a parent to recognize in patterns is when you have like layered antecedents. So it wasn't like the last thing that caused that it was the cause. It's like this, over a 10-minute period, this evolution of things that really just pissed my kid off or that really he was frustrated with. That it's, as a human, it's really hard to like see that pattern. But the beauty of AI is that it's incredibly good at recommending, like, was it this sequence of events? Was it this one? And so it's like a sort of think of it as like a cheat sheet for the therapist and to say, give them some more options of determining which series of events really led up to, right, that explosion. And, it's nothing like, sort of the scary AI in our minds. Like, it's not deciding for the therapist why the kid is behaving this way. It's really just recommending to them, hey, here are some patterns we see. And that's my vision for where we're going to go as a company. It's, we're starting off as data collection and just making the therapist's lives easier by collecting data in session in an easier way, where they don't have to take their eyes off your kid. But long term, it's really aggregating all of that data so that we can start seeing patterns better and augmenting the day-to-day sessions of the therapist, the RBTs and the BCBAs of just recommending, hey, here are some patterns that we're seeing, use different protocols to figure out, is that the true antecedent of what's causing the behavior, or is it not? And then what rewards work better or worse, right? What consequences lead to behavior change? Because, like you said, this is all a detective game. And if it's really data-driven, then why not use the most advanced tools we have as a society to help our kids make progress as quickly as possible?
Wonderful. So one of the things that we saw, because there's a demo video that you guys have, and we've been playing portions of it, and in an ideal world, it would have matched exactly what you were talking about. But let's talk, but we don't live in an ideal world. So let's talk about some of the things that in the beginning, what you saw was how quickly and easy somebody just logs into it, how it's private. And then you saw a screen that was really meant for, I think, the BCBAs, where they can see all their clients. And one of the things that I was struck by when I watched is that for each one of the sessions there, it very clearly defined for the BCBAs what is in progress, what they've already written all the notes for, what they could join right now, what still requires notes. Because when they're managing a lot of kids with having a lot of sessions, just to be able to quickly see, here is where my workload still is, I think that, first of all, is a really great aspect, right?
Yep.
But then from there, we started to see where it's totally customizable. Because I do think when you say AI, people go, oh, we're not going to be in charge anymore. But it still allows the supervisors to totally customize for the child. It's not taking away that, but it does have prompts for different things. In fact, one of the things that we saw in one of the full screen video things was about which level of prompt were you using for the child. That is a prompt for the person about which prompt are you using for the child. So I do think that in all the ways that it can be helpful and fill in the blanks, it's almost like, and this is an inelegant way of putting it, but it's like a Mad Lib. Do you know what I mean?
It can be, and in fact, you can actually create your own Mad Lib, if I'm following that analogy. So all of those treatment plans, those were written by the BCBA. So you can write in whatever you'd like. There's obviously a template library, so you can pick from, things that other people have used or that maybe your agencies has as a best practice. But you can 100% write in whatever treatment plan you think as a BCBA is the most appropriate for that child. And 100% agreed, right? Every scenario, every situation is different. The kids are different. So, but you can also use templates. So that part is like, it is a little bit like if you use the Mad Libs analogy, you can use it as Mad Libs. You can also write your own. And then what's important in for the BCBA is to not only see the progress of their notes, but also we do have the option of recording video and audio of the sessions, which is really incredible because, and I saw this as a parent many, many times, you know, when the BCBA is dropped in for their supervision, it's funny, those are the moments where your kids like exactly decide not to exhibit the behaviors that you've all been talking about that you want the BCBA to see, right? It's like Murphy's Law. So imagine now that when you're recording the sessions, you can point to the exact time, right? Like, hey, here was the moment where, you know, my kid really lost it and started hurting themselves, but we couldn't figure out what the antecedent actually was, or if it was a layered antecedent. And that's where you can have that you're talking about, you're thinking it through in your head, but just imagine if your therapist could actually watch, right, and the entire team, they can watch the video of what happened, what were the behaviors that led up to it. That I think is a really powerful thing. And that, by the way, is also what could help payers, process and approve and authorize payments better and faster, because it gives them the assurance and transparency that, you know, the providers are indeed working on what they said they're working on. The kid is indeed making progress, as they have said. And, you know, one of the things we didn't touch on is one of the core reasons why the coordination hasn't and collaboration hasn't been as good as we as parents would like to see is there's no third party evidence that can prove to the payer or even to the parent, right? You know, did you get the outcomes you said you would get? It's not like in other medical treatments where there's a blood test or an MRI, we can prove like, hey, this thing got better. In our field, unfortunately, it's really the therapist's word, and you just have to take their word for it. And so that's hard for a payer to just hang their hat and their payments on. You know, I'm just going to accept whatever the provider says they did and however they think that the kid improved.
Yeah, I love hearing about it from your point of view with your experience with insurance, because I just tend to get frustrated. I think with like a lot of parents, I get frustrated with the insurance. And I forget that part of it is this is such a new thing to them that they don't entirely get it. I just sometimes see that they're standing in the way. I love that you're the brighter mind, that you're figuring out how to translate between the two so that the payers, because I do think that part of it is that they want to be responsible and ethical. And listen, I want them to be responsible and ethical too. I don't want them to be funding some of this stuff that's called ABA that we all know is not ABA. I want that caught and nipped, because it's not helping anyone and it's wasting kids and parents' time. So I love that you're collaborating. I'm glad you're in charge of that, Ling. I would not be somebody to be in charge. We're starting to run low on time. So one of the things that you talk about with AI is this human in the loop development. Tell me what that is, because I'm unfamiliar with that.
So human in the loop is it's the AI is a supplement for the human who is actually performing the services. So there's a couple different ways to use AI. One is like where you just assume you let the AI be in charge, right? That's more like the self-driving cars are completely autonomous. You don't need to, right? You're not involved at all. Human loop, if we go with the driving analogy, is more like, you know, nowadays in a lot of the newer cars, they have like lane assist, where it's not like the car is driving for you, but it's just giving you a little prompt like, hey, you're, you know, veering out of your lane, which, you know, if you're a parent with kids on the spectrum and, you know, they're not behaving in the back of the car, that happens more likely or more often than we'd like to admit. So think of human loop AI as more like lane assist, where we're using technology behind the scenes to give you these prompts that should help you, but it doesn't take over your driving. You're still driving the car. So in our case, the provider is still the one making all the clinical decisions. They're the ones with the expertise. We're simply using AI and technology behind the scenes as a tool that says, let me improve how easy it is for you to document. Let me help you with some of the data analytics and show you based on, the software doing the calculations, how we think the kid is progressing. And here are some patterns that the software is picking up. And you as the provider may or may not choose to act on that, or you may or may not decide that that's accurate or not accurate. That's human loop. So it's more assisted driving versus autonomous driving.
Okay. I love that. And we touched on this briefly, but how are you how are you specifically working with insurance companies and even employers to change this current dynamic?
Yeah. So again, I know many parents who at least have gone down the path of insurance have faced denials, and it's been frustrating. And by the way, ironically, I have as well, even though I worked for an insurer for a long time. And believe me, it's not malice. It's just exactly what you said. It's a new field. We're all learning, and it's better, transparency of data and holding the providers accountable for delivering the results, which, we as parents want. And what's been incredible is you have to imagine there's a lot of employers out there. They're the ones who actually pay the ultimate bill, right, for all of your treatment. So it's not the insurance company necessarily that's paying for it. Most people are covered by what's called self-funded employers. It means your employer is the one paying the medical bills, and they're simply using the insurance company to administer the claim, set up the network. And so you have to imagine employers, they care deeply about their employees and want what's best for these families. And many of the folks who sit in the benefits team, the HR teams, they're personally impacted by autism as well, whether it's their own children, their grandkids, or their nieces or nephews, and they want to do the right thing. And it's unbelievably, I think hurtful that for them to feel like, hey, we're getting in the way of these families. That's not at all their intention. If anything, they're trying to go out of their way to help. And they've been part of the reason why we've seen a lot of this insurance change and coverage. And so we're super excited that, we found a few of these employers. I think eBay is the one that I can announce because they have been on stage with us. So these self-funded employers like eBay have raised their hand and said, hey, this is an important topic for us. We want the payers to really innovate and improve their process because we want to get our families better access and faster access, but not just to anyone, right? Not the bad ABA providers. You were just mentioning, Shannon. We're talking about the ones that really are willing to sign up for better transparency of data because they're high quality providers, right? And they're not afraid to share the data. They actually want to share the data so that they can more easily get enough care and like the right amount of care and have the flexibility, right, to go up or down, let's say on supervision hours or how many hours of services a kid needs every month. Really take ownership of, hey, give me the reins as a provider, give me ownership, and I will get the outcomes that everybody wants. But get rid of all this paperwork. Don't delay treatment because we need to fill out all the paperwork for the prior authorizations, the approvals. So it's really about getting better and faster access to services in an unhindered way, and then rallying everybody around outcomes. So employers like eBay have raised their hand, and they've made this message very clear to their insurance company partners. And I think it's an incredible way for these very innovative employers to also garner a lot of loyalty and honestly, do a better job recruiting because I personally know a lot of families who would probably change jobs to go to an employer who really, supported this kind of coverage.
And to your point about waiting, Autism Journey with 𝗟𝗧 wrote in and said, we finally found a center, but the wait list does not have an opening until the end of the fall. But as long as we can get into a center to see behind the scenes, we can also go somewhere else if openings arise. This is awesome. We've been fighting for about 3 years to get services for ABA therapy.
That is exactly what the head of benefits at eBay was fighting, for, because they're in the Bay Area, and a lot of agencies have closed there, unfortunately. So they're like, what can we do to help our payers get more providers in this area, right? And part of the problem in the last couple of years has been just wage inflation on the frontline staff. So, right, the average salary of an RBT has gone up substantially, but the insurance reimbursement rates haven't kept pace. And so agencies literally can't afford to pay frontline staff, and they can't get anyone to work for them. So they have to shut their doors. And that's what I think eBay and employers like them are like, this is ridiculous. And 2-year wait times, unfortunately, are not the norm. 3 years, that's almost criminal. It's horrible. So I feel so badly for these parents, and part of what the eBay program and employers like them who are signing up is that they are gonna they're basically eBay is paying rates that allow providers to actually open offices and provide services in the areas where those kids and families are living. So
that's amazing.
That's the goal.
We've only got about 2 minutes left. So tell us what's happening in Washington, D.C., because if we don't have legislation to help along this line, we're cooked. So what's going on right now? Give us a beat.
Sure. So all the parents who are listening to this, I hope you're, writing your senators and congressmen. So there's a new act that's out there. It's called the Behavioral Health Information Technology Coordination Act. So kind of a handful, but basically it's providing aid for behavioral health clinicians to implement electronic medical records. So for the most part, physical medicine providers, right, like your, oncologists or orthopedic surgeons, it's a mandate. They have to have electronic medical records, and that software is expensive. But behavioral health clinicians, like psychiatrists, psychologists, for the most part, were not included. And so this bill is basically providing aid for behavioral health providers. Unfortunately, the problem is they don't consider BCBAs or RBTs or part of those behavioral health clinicians, which is absurd, right? I think it's just an oversight because there's so many kids who are impacted. So really, we're trying to garner some of our investors and advisors in getting their support in ensuring that we add ABA providers on the list so that all these big and all the ABA companies can receive assistance so they can put in better electronic medical records, right? So the therapists are not walking around with the trifold paper trying to do documentation. That's not fair to them or to us. So that's a bill we are working on, and we are both Patrick Kennedy and Senator Bill Frist are helping us, get attention to this oversight in the bill.
Amazing. So for parents that are watching this, we want to leave with a little bit of a call to an action. If you're really concerned about outcomes and wanting to know that your ABA provider is going to be able to continue to give you that kind of thing, you should visit the website and take a look around. But then they should, correct me if I'm wrong, they should talk with their ABA provider and with their employer.
That's 100% right. So really, it's telling the provider, hey, did you know that there's a service out there that can make documentation easier and help you get better access to the payers, right? So you're not fighting them. And then two, if you work for a large employer, it's really reaching out to your head of benefits. And the more noise you can make, the more they're going to know that they can reach out to their health insurance companies, right, to actually select a different program that gets you better access and just less heartache when it comes to dealing with approvals.
So you guys are on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter. What's the website that they would go to?
They would go to either spectrumai.com or better yet in LinkedIn if they just look up it's linkedin.com /company/ Spectrum AI Autism Innovation.
Okay.
They can just Google Autism Innovation.
And that is all on the links underneath in the description. That's the word I'm trying to find for this interview. Yeah. I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and I think that it's important. I think that it's vital, and again, I'm grateful that your bright mind is working on it so that mine doesn't have to.
In this industry, the reason why there's been so much legislation and progress is all because of parents. So I'm just simply paying it forward because I know that my kids could not have had the progress they have had without so many parents and, blood, sweat, and tears along the way. So I'm just trying to be another cog that helps in that big wheel of, us as a community pushing for what's right for our kids.
You're paying it forward. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you'll come back and give us updates on things and how things are going, both for your family and for your company. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You take care. Bye-bye. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook.